Usually, when a movie flops, and its rating holds a divisive value among critics, one could pretty instinctively assume that something is wrong with the piece of art itself. However, in the case of The Fountain, made by Aronofsky, I have no qualms saying that something must be profoundly wrong with the rest of the surrounding society instead. And the cult following it gained since the time of its release may be seen as a correction of this terrible state of things. To me, The Fountain might be the most emotional masterpiece of symbolism and the best portrayal of the spiritual and metaphysical nature of our lived reality that there is. The fact that the movie critics can find this objectionable, the fact that, for the convenience of the American public, this movie had to falsely dress itself into a garb of science fiction, speaks about a dire situation of Western society. And it shows us just how artistically and spiritually vacuous is the shallow, petty, secular morality which is trying to rob humanity of any divine grace. Thankfully, from the time of its release, this movie gained a mythological status. It has been understood as something profound, almost dreamlike. But I see certain confusion about the meaning of it all, at least in the way of its symbolic structure. The broader strokes are of course clear. For example, the fact that this is a movie about acceptance of our mortality. But I do believe it is worthwhile to spend some time decoding its symbols and their relation to the whole story. Aronofsky himself described the movie as a Rubik's Cube, a puzzle with many paths, but one final solution. I believe this movie is fundamentally about the structure of our lived experience, about the trinitarian interplay of the body, the mind, and the spirit, and about how these three together provide the vision of divinity. So, within the upcoming show, I shall analyze the careful interplay between different layers of this story. I'll extract some important symbolic elements, and finally, when all pieces are laid out before us, I'll try to solve this Rubik's Cube. The Fountain is a symbolic masterpiece, and it needs to be understood as such. Many faults concerning its general analysis, for example, trying to mangle the story to fit into a science fiction lens, are essentially in the same realm of delusion as his fundamentalist approach to holy texts, parables, or mythological stories. It speaks more to the mediocre folly of human unimaginativeness rather than to the core of given knowledge. Something about seeing trees and not seeing the forest comes to my mind. Traditionally, the story of the Fountain is described as three intertwined timelines, first happening in the early 1600s, in the setting of Spanish colonialism, a second in the present, contemporary modernity, and a third in the far future in stylized spacecraft, presumably, and for the sake of symmetry, set in the early 2600s. The main characters, played by Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz, are present in somewhat different roles throughout these timelines. In the historical setting, a conquistador, Tomás Creo, is questing on behalf of Isabella I, who is in a conflict with the Spanish Inquisition, to find eternal life hidden in the mythical Fountain of Youth. In the modern setting, a Dr. Tommy Creo is researching a cure hidden in a Mesoamerican tree to save his love Izzy from the growth of a brain tumor. And finally, in the science fiction setting, a space monk Tom is traveling within a tree-bubble spacecraft to the heart of a dying star, Xibalba, to harness its energy. Essentially, this interpretation is trying to understand this story in the same manner as one would understand the Cloud Atlas. And fair enough. It is customary to leave above-average wiggle room for analysis when talking about symbolic stories. Though I still find this Cloud Atlas approach utterly misguided. The truth is more complicated. Much more. Some may and will of course say I am overcomplicating stuff. So I just want to say that, first, reality was never trying to be simple for the convenience of our primate brains. And second, one should not mistake shallowness for simplicity. Real simplicity, the beauty of geometric symmetries, is hidden in abstractions, while shallow approach robs any piece of art of its symbolic value under the guise of illusionary simplicity. The story is not necessarily ordered by the idea of time or chronology between different centuries. Instead, it is organized in embedded layers of abstraction. The historical setting is not a historical one. It is instead a story written in a book by dying Izzy in the present. And the present itself is a real lived experience embedded in the more encompassing symbolic world of spiritual ideals, where this lived experience manifests as a disjointed echoes, memories of a dream the spiritual self has. Dr. Tommy is reading about Conquistador Thomas, whilst Monk Tom is dreaming, pondering, and having visions about the life of Dr. Tommy. And this is because the ultimate represented pattern is not one of time, but one of the deeply important triad of the body, the mind, and the spirit. The movie's opening scenes are focused on the Conquistador Thomas. He is kneeling and praying before a holy relic, a piece of hair, a mere materialistic representation of something bigger. He takes out a ring packed in a piece of leather, skin, and very emotionally kisses it and sniffs it, while reminiscing about Queen Isabella, them looking at each other, them touching by hand, and finally, them exchanging the ring itself. In the first dreamlike scene of the movie, in a matter of 1 minute, most of human bodily senses are presented to us, whilst Thomas literally prays to a piece of body, the holy relic. In the next scene, Thomas stands with 2 of his soldiers before a row of skulls, impaled on spikes. Suddenly, they are ambushed by the Mayan natives. They are trapped behind a literal fence of bones, and subsequently the 2 soldiers are brutally killed by the natives' spears. This is a juxtaposition to the Thomas praying scene, which explored the idea of higher light hidden in the concept of the body. Here we are exploring the darkness, the ultimate bane of the body, death itself. And since the body is very primal, for it, death means only pain and suffering. It does not see any higher ideal behind it. The only response body has is,
I will not die. Not here. Not now. Never!
I will not die. Not here. Not now. Never. Subsequently, the only course of action is, of course, to fight, kick, and struggle. Thomas is captured by the natives, which are portrayed as quite devilish or demonic in their appearance. They are wild, unbound, energetic, merciless, and innumerable. They represent our own inner demons of pain and struggle. Demons which we do not understand easily, for we do not share a language. In the Buddhist story of Buddha's own process of enlightenment, we actually encounter a similar motif. He is sitting under the Bodhi tree, spending days in a grand meditation. During the process, he is continually attacked by the demons of the god Mara, god of death, or rather the god of the concept of perishable death-related matters. Again, the bodily things. Mara is sending his armies of demonic soldiers to unnerve Buddha, to test him whether he can withstand the onslaught of all his inner fears, traumas, and weaknesses with calm harmony, deserving of an enlightenment. And the same thing is really happening in the Christian story of Jesus being tempted in the desert while fasting for 40 days. You can pretty much experience this personally. When you sit down and stop distracting yourself with whatever you like to do to distract yourself, and if you focus your attention on the inner world, the first thing that starts to crawl out for many people is everything dark they do not want to acknowledge. Confronting your demons is always the first step of growth. they are not obstacles to be obliterated. They are part of you, and are to be accepted as your inner mechanisms. Mechanisms that may have gotten a bit unruly or terrifying whilst growing all alone in the dark, but they are still your own and are here to motivate you, test you, and move you forward. And so, in this spirit, we can understand the subsequent development of the movie. Conquistador Thomas is captured by the incomprehensible soldiers of material death, but instead of being killed, he is forced by their spears to climb a pyramid, all alone, leaving them behind. Through the test of his own demons, he is forced to ascend. At the top of the pyramid, he is awaited by a Mayan priest wearing a crown of bones, or possibly a crown of thorns, and holding a flaming sword, echoing the cherubim guarding the Garden of Eden. A biblical verse which is actually at the very beginning of the movie. And here, whilst attacking, this fantastical magician gives answer to Thomas's previous statement. The body was faced with death and pain and screamed, "I will not die, not here, not now, never." The divine priest welcomes him with lines, "First Father sacrificed himself for the tree of life. Enter and join his fate." And while stabbing him with a sacrificial dagger, he gives the final answer. Death is the road to awe. This is all, of course, said in Mayan language. Conquistador, the body, does not yet understand this. The written story of Conquistador Thomas and his quest for the legendary Fountain of Youth is embedded in the presumably real-lived contemporary experience of Dr. Tommy. It is revealed that he is a scientist, an obvious representation of the world of mind. Moreover, in the center of his research lies the topic of brain tumors. He is essentially trying to use his mind to heal that ailment which directly attacks the mind, as opposed to the body, whose response to suffering and death is a pretty aggressive, instinctive fight response. The mind sees death as a disease to be cured, as a problem to be solved through the power of scientific rationality. But scientific rationality, this quite masculine trait in the alchemical sense, is also somewhat blind to the actual lived experience of its own life. It is so hyper-focused on solving an issue that it does not pay attention to actually living life while it can. This is shown in the first scene with Dr. Tommy, in which he sits in his office and his partner Izzy is asking him to go for a walk, since it is the first snow and this couple always went together to see the first snow. But Tommy refuses with anger, because he wants to stay focused on his scientific research. Position of both characters ultimately stems from their own struggle with mortality. Izzy is terminally ill with a brain cancer, and wants to spend her last lived days on Earth, just living them, side by side with her love, walking in the winter's first and her last snow. And Tommy, on the other hand, embarked on a Faustian quest to find a cure, to actually physically save her, sacrificing the certainty of their last moments spent together for an impossible, almost unreachable goal. This by itself may actually sound like a more cliché story about a man saving his love against all odds. But this is not such a story. Throughout the movie, Izzy tries to repeatedly bring up the theme of her impending death. She tries to convey that she is fine with it, that she found divine grace. Tommy, absolutely and profoundly emotionally, does not want to participate in such discussion. He actively resists the realization that Izzy is dying. He is incapable of facing mortality. His prime motivator to find cure is not to save Izzy per se. His motivator is that he cannot accept that people in general, and he himself, have to die. And this is what we, people, do. Especially in the modern age. We are permanently haunted by the ever-approaching shadow of our eventual demise. The idea of facing this fear can be so daunting that we try to occupy ourselves with a plethora of many other smaller issues. We submerge ourselves into false idols of career building. We distract ourselves with vapid gossip. We bicker on the internet about minute details of the latest inconsequential microaggression, and we embark on the quest to surround ourselves with as much materialistic things and pleasures, and stuffs and gadgets as we can to keep our mind shielded from the realization of our own perishability. Modern society killed the divine and disintegrated the meaning. First, the meaning of death, and then the meaning of life itself. The only outlet left, substituting lived fulfilled experience, is rationalistic mastering of the material itself, mind trying to enslave the flesh in a Faustian attempt to shatter the reality itself and achieve some vain kind of liberty in a dead, meaningless universe. Tommy himself is so engulfed in this process that he is not capable of understanding what his love is saying to him. She began to study Mayan mythology, its attitude to death, and its vision of afterlife and rebirth inside a golden dying star far, far away, called Xibalba. It seems that she found something important and soothing. She is slowly accepting her mortality. She is stopping to identify with her own body. This is represented by the revelation that the tumor in her brain grew, and she cannot feel cold or warmth anymore. As she says,
"Because I feel different inside. I feel different. Every moment. Each one."
Notice that as much as she is crying when revealing this to Tommy, she is also displaying a faint smile. The process of opening ourselves, of accepting our own pain with tears, is often accompanied with relief and with certain happiness for finally being true to ourselves, even if it hurts. Maybe part of her smile is targeted to Tommy, to comfort him, because he's struggling with this acceptance much more than Izzy, the dying woman herself. Not as a sign of struggle, but as a sign of honesty, Izzy explicitly and with great emphasis reveals that she is afraid.
I'm afraid.
This is the main way the mind is capable of understanding death. The body refuses to die. Not here, not now, never. The mind, however, fears the inevitability. Where the body bleeds and where the mind shakes, the spirit is awoken from a bad dream. The monk, Tom, is enclosed in a small lonely world, consisting of a tree and a surrounding pond in a glass sphere, tender, fragile, translucent bubble in the vast cosmos of floating lights. The spirit is traveling to its goal, to the dying star Xibalba. The monk is haunted by echoes of his dreams. They provoke in him an emotional reaction. He is awoken screaming from a vision of Conquistador Thomas being stabbed by the sacrificial dagger. He falls to anger when reliving visions of Izzy asking Dr. Tommy to take a walk in the first snow. For the spirit, the struggle is not to get lost in its own dream, the dream of being a person, the dream of living a life. To the thread of the balance, the spirit uses different techniques, all revolving around keeping inner calm harmony. We see the monk meditate, accept, essentially, a holy sacrament from the bark of his tree. He cleanses himself in the pond, he performs Tai Chi exercise, and eventually, he ritualistically tattoos himself. But he cannot rest. The visions are still haunting him. For the spirit still has an unfinished task, a promise to be fulfilled. In the layer of the mind, dying Izzy told Dr. Tommy her last wish. She has been writing a book about Conquistador Thomas and his quest for the Fountain of Youth. The last chapter remains to be written, and Izzy wishes for Tommy to finish it.
Finish it.
I don't know how it ends.
You do. You will.
Echoes of this dying wish are what haunts the spirit. The spirit struggles to accept its own dream of life, because it forces him to actually live it. He needs to go through all the motions, the pains, and the fears of lower realms. And this would also force him to witness the goal and the end of his journey. It would force him to live through death. This is our very own human struggle. We are split between wanting to live our lives, to feel both its warmth and its frost, but we fear that If we engulf ourselves into the experience, we will suffer the eventual, inevitable end of such an adventure. For many, the answer lies in ascetic refusal of life. Many Buddhists, Christians, and others choose to deal with the pain of life via an absolute rejection of the concept of living itself. They bind their minds to the light of the divinity, and they shun their own body. They distance themselves from their own story just to get to the other end, to Xibalba. But our monk Tommy is much wiser. After first trying to distance himself from his own visions through different techniques, he eventually realizes that he can neither fight death, as does the body, or run from it, as does the mind. He needs to face it.
All right. I trust you.
And so he allows for the experience to happen. He accepts that he needs to live through these stories, to find how they end, to know how to finish them. Previously, I stated that I find it to be misguided to understand this story as bound by constraints of time. This is not a story of the past, the present, and the future. From the point of view of Dr. Tommy, the story of Conquistador Thomas is a book. The time of the written story runs differently, independently of the world surrounding it. And in the same vein, the dream of living a life is independent from the monk, from the spirit suspended in the vast cosmos. This structural relation permits for different situations from different layers to echo throughout the story in a non-chronological manner. Different dialogues repeated, reinterpreted, and molded into new meaning as the movie continues. The result is a tender dance of intertwined scenes. Slowly, the different relations between the three layers are revealed. The world of the spirit keeps entering the lower realms, signalized by a golden glow and the eye-like pattern of the star Xibalba. This glow and this pattern is, for example, responsible for Dr. Tommy having a breakthrough in his research. Another example would be Conquistador Thomas having an audience with his queen. Her hall is filled with suspended candles, like the stars surrounding the monk traveling the cosmos. And of course, in the center of it all is the Golden Queen bathing in light. Interestingly, the Conquistador is presented here with an ancient Mayan dagger, containing the symbol of the structural Trinity itself, one which is supposed to lead him to his goal. Of course, the world of the body is actually a written story from the point of view of the mind. It is read by Dr. Tommy and written by Izzy herself. Her vision of their relationship and of her medical condition is the underlying inspiration for her art. The brave conquistador, meaning conqueror, is serving his beloved queen. She herself is threatened by an ever-growing enemy, the powerful Spanish Inquisition, expanding throughout the territories of the crown. This mirrors very clearly Izzy's own growing tumor. But the role of the Inquisition, represented by the terrifying Grand Inquisitor, is much more sophisticated. The Inquisitor is the herald of seemingly cruel spiritual acceptance of death. Our first encounter with him is when he is flagellating, purposefully damaging his own body to distance himself from the material world. From the point of the body, spirituality seems cruel. It is a dictate causing pain and preaching about unattainable ideals which do not need the body to be fulfilled. They need its destruction. This Inquisitor is a caricature of how a materially focused individual may see spirituality as cruel and cold. This is the stern and austere voice, judging us inside our heads, based on harsh morality. This is pretty much summed up in the monologue of the Grand Inquisitor himself, when he is executing the condemned heretics.
Our bodies are prisons for our souls. Our skin and blood, the iron bars of confinement. But fear not, all flesh decays, death turns all to ash, and thus death frees every soul.
The Grand Inquisitor, the callous voice of distant spirituality, is mirrored by the Mayan priest we have encountered at the beginning of the movie. Both of these religious specialists are in some sense bringers of death. The body conflates the idea of being spiritually conscious with the idea of a tyrant that is to be defeated. And, in the same vein, Dr. Tommy refuses to understand when dying Izzy, after making her last wish, tells him that she does not fear death anymore.
I'm not afraid anymore, Tommy.
Perhaps the most apparent symbol present in all three layers of the story is the Tree of Life. This is of course an ancient symbol, old as humanity itself, and this is caused by the fact that the shape of a tree is the most obvious natural representation of the bifurcation fractal pattern. 3 is the most common example of our universe being a fractal itself. Moreover, the pattern of the tree is explicitly showing transformation of scale. You are capable of looking at the massive tree trunk, the macro scale, and then to move along its body, to see it getting more slim, tender, more numerous, until you are looking at the tiny veins hidden in a leaf, the micro scale. The tree, therefore, is not only the symbol of a fractal universe, it is also a symbol of a journey between different magnitudes. This is of course the reason why the tree Yggdrasil is supposed to host the 9 worlds of Norse mythology. They are at different scales, or layers, and the functioning is pretty much the same across different mythologies. It was under the Bodhi tree where Buddha attained his enlightenment. And finally, it is of course the biblical Tree of Life in the middle of the Garden of Eden, mentioned explicitly during the movie. It remains a contentious issue whether the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge are separate or one and the same. As far as I am concerned, I don't think it matters, and it simply seems to me geometrically logical that the thing in the middle of something else is one thing, and that the separation stems from translational issues. In the Story of the Fountain, we see the Tree of Life again in different iterations. For the body, the tree serves as the goal. It is the Tree of Life in the Fountain of Youth that is supposed to give the conquistador and his queen immortality. The Tree of Life is therefore something the body is searching for. It lies at the end of its journey. It is to be arrived at. In the realm of the mind, Dr. Tommy encounters the Tree of Life after having an epiphany concerning his research. After being struck by the golden light of Xibalba, he decides to use a sample of an ancient Mesoamerican tree to heal the cancer of his test subject, Monkey Donovan, played by Monkey Yola. And, as we learn later, this sample is actually capable of miraculously both reversing aging and later even healing a brain tumor. From the point of the mind, this tree is not a goal by itself, it is merely the means of achieving it. This iteration of the tree is not even really shown to us beyond a picture in a file and some powdery sample in a vial. It is always seen through the lenses of tools. It is encountered during the character's journey. And in the realm of the spirit, the tree is present from the very beginning of its journey to Xibalba. It is, essentially, the only thing accompanying the monk. Moreover, it is in the very center of his own little world. This tree is the only thing that remains static in the monk's frame of reference, while the rest of the universe is moving or flowing around them. The goal here is to see the tree bloom, to revive it through the power of the dying star. In this layer, it is not something that helps the monk to achieve the goal of the journey. The goal of the journey is to help the tree. So even though the tree is present across all layers of the story, it plays a very different role in each one of them. This is incredibly interesting asymmetry. When analyzing a multi-layered symbolic piece of art, one is of course instinctively trying to find symmetrical relations between the symbols. Instead, our first shallow impression is somewhat subverted. We would, for example, want to see the Tree of Life as the symbolic goal of all 3 journeys, but instead we are given 3 different pieces matching together like a puzzle. One is the motivation at the beginning of the journey. The other is tool met in the middle. And finally, the last one is the presumed goal. The Tree of Life belongs into a larger family of symbols named axis mundi, the axis of the world. These are any symbolic, standing tower-like structures. The story and its whole world rotates around them, and they are meant to be used for deriving your location in reference to them. They are like the North Pole. They can take form of a tower, tree, totem, mountain, or anything tall really. An interesting thing about them is that they permit you to climb above. You start somewhere down, rooted in the firm ground, and through their help, you pierce through the different layers of abstraction, moving yourself closer to heavens. If you'd like to know more about the Tree of Life and meaning of this climb through abstractions, I suggest you my previous video about Kabbalistic teachings. In this specific story, the tree is its spine. It is the abstract structural element keeping the three layers in relation to each other. The reason for its asymmetrical position, the reason for its asymmetrical meanings, the reason for it not being simply the clear goal of each layer is because for every one of these layers it is essentially the symbol of an illusionary goal. It is something that both promises to find what you are searching for, and at the same time it is that which binds you on a somewhat faulty path. The three branches are crooked and winding as any journey is. In some sense, every one of these three seems to be stolen from the layer next to it. For the monk, in the realm of the spirit, it is suggested that the tree is the dying Izzy herself. The soft hairs of the tree are clearly mirrored by the soft hairs of her neck as they are shown in the realm of the mind. And of course, her own death is immediately mirrored by the death of this tree. The general pattern hidden in the tree the monk is taking care of is the pattern of Izzy's mind. This is her personality that he loves so much. Monk's motivation stems from worshipping the lower layer of the mind. For the doctor, the origin of the miraculous cure he is searching for is in an ancient Mesoamerican tree. This is the elixir of life that was supposed to be at the end of the conquistador's journey. The prize the mind is actually gaining is the one wanted again by the lower layer of the body, while the goal of actually saving Izzy's personality is unfulfilled. And finally, Conquistador himself, as bodily as he is essentially on a spiritual journey. He is expecting to find what is given to the higher realm of mind, the elixir of life. But instead his journey is one of climbing the Mayan pyramid, one of leaving his body, his pain behind. It is a journey that is supposed to explain to him how the first father sacrificed himself for the growth of the tree. Something that would be, of course, much more fitting for the monk sitting in the layer of the spirit. Thus, our circle of motivation is finished. And speaking of circles and cyclical journeys, there is of course another ever-present symbol tied to this theme. I speak of the symbol of the ring. A symbol that is again in a very interesting, asymmetrical position as far as our three-layered structure goes. The golden ring is encountered in the very first scene of the movie, when the conquistador is praying. Later, it is revealed that it was given to him by his queen as a part of promise to fulfill the quest for the Fountain of Youth. During the audience scene, the queen lets the sun shine in her throne room and binds the conquistador with an oath.
Will you deliver Spain from bondage? Then you shall take this ring to remind you of your promise. You shall wear it when you find Eden. Together we will live forever.
A ring, generally in our culture, symbolizes a promise. When the Titan Prometheus stole the fire from gods, he was condemned to be crucified for eternity to a rock while being tortured by an eagle. Many eons later, he was saved by the hero Heracles, who killed the eagle and severed his chain of bondage. But, because his condemnation by gods needed to be fulfilled, he fashioned a ring from one of the chain's segments and from a piece of said rock. This way, Prometheus could be for eternity bound, keeping the will of God satisfied. Our specific symbol of the ring in the fountain plays of course a similar role. It is a symbol of promise. It binds one to his quest or duty. However, same as it was with the Tree of Life, this symbol varies greatly between the three layers. For the conquistador, it is symbol of fulfilling his journey. He will be able to wear it once he found the Fountain of Youth. On the other hand, no pun intended, Dr. Tommy already wears his ring at the beginning of his story arc. It is, of course, his wedding ring, the symbol of his relation with Izzy. And this relation is precisely what Tommy sacrifices on the altar of science. When washing his hands for an upcoming operation, he lays the ring on a suspiciously fountain-like looking sink, and when he comes back the ring is already lost. It is nowhere to be found. It's the fragility of our world that speaks through the ring's absence in the layer of the mind. And similarly, this absence echoes to the higher abstraction of the spirit. The monk is not wearing any ring. Instead, he has a tattoo where the ring is supposed to be. The spirit is not bound by something material per se, but is forever marked by an imprint of a memory. And he continues to grow this pattern through other tattoos circling his whole arm. This imprint, this memory, echoes throughout his whole being. When you look at the three rings, you can notice something interesting. The most shining, intricate, and obviously holy ring is the one held by the conquistador. And the more we move into abstraction, the more the ring becomes symbolized more by its absence than its material weight. Eventually, we are not really bound by our rings, but by the imprints they left in us for eternity. Throughout all the previous chapters, I've laid out all necessary pieces of this puzzle. We have three intertwined layers of differing abstraction, connected via symbols in a strangely asymmetrical manner. And I believe this inherent asymmetry is what constitutes the Rubik's Cube here, as it was described by Aronofsky. The movements we need to perform to solve the cube are the same which rectify this asymmetry. The Fountain is fundamentally a story solving its own asymmetry. The moment when all the pieces start to fall into their right place is when Izzy finally dies in a hospital bed. Just moments later, Dr. Tommy is informed that his miraculous cure from a Mesoamerican tree was able to heal the tumor of his test subject. Alas, it is too late. The tree was an illusionary, false goal. It may have cured the monkey, but it is too late. And ultimately we also know that the tree itself was sterile, unable to reproduce, and the scientists have only a couple of samples on their hands. In the same moment, death of the pattern of her mind echoes to the realm of the spirit, and the monk screams in agony as his own tree begins to die. Dr. Tommy is mourning, all alone in his bedroom, pondering the last empty chapter of Izzy's book that he promised to finish.
Finish it.
He does not know how.
I don't know how it ends.
You do. You will.
After an outburst of impotent rage, he spills out ink, and using the last gift given to him by Izzy, a pen, he begins to tattoo himself. He is recreating the lost ring. This also means that Tommy is starting to accept pain. He hurts himself, and he bleeds, evoking the image of the Grand Inquisitor flagellating himself. Tommy is slowly preparing to face the question of pain and death he has been avoiding throughout the whole movie up to now. With newly found calm, he returns to work. He wants to defeat death itself. But instead of actually being able to get back to work, the lights in the room go out, and he is left in darkness. He is confused, looking around him, until the light of the spirit itself enters the room. Tommy looks into the light of Xibalba. And from this moment, we have entered the escalation phase of this whole movie. Now, we are ready to rectify the main asymmetries. Together with the doctor, the monk is finally able to face Xibalba itself. His vision is returning, and the monk faces it.
Stop it! What do you want? Leave me alone!
As I talked about earlier, the process of accepting our pains demands not struggle, but honesty. Same as Izzy honestly acknowledged that she, however reconciled with her fate, is afraid.
I'm afraid.
The monk finally acknowledges it too. And, as a reward for his acceptance, for facing his own demons, he is permitted to gaze not upon Izzy, but on Queen Isabella herself. reminiscent of the Virgin Mary, as she blesses him. This is the first time that a character, or a symbol, from the realm of the body can actually physically enter the realm of the spirit, whilst until now they were mostly linked through the middle layer of the mind. Finally, the story of the body and the light of the spirit begin to interact in a beautiful dance. In Queen's Golden Grace, the monk can stand up and be reminded of his oath to deliver Spain from bondage.
Will you deliver Spain from bondage?
I don't know how.
You do. You will. You do. You will.
Finally, the monk can smile in relief, because he understands.
I'm gonna die.
He too will die. He stops avoiding his own mortality and realizes how he will be reunited with his Eve. It will be in eternity. Through death, they will live together, and it is time to finish it. In the reiterated scene of the first snow, we see Dr. Tommy ditching his research and actually choosing to go with Izzy as he should have done, thus leaving the false ideal of his own miraculous Mesoamerican tree of life. What he was craving for was the tree of the monk, the tree of Izzy's personality, of her specific existence. The monk subsequently climbs his tree, flies from it, and leaves it behind him in the lower realm. He leaves his own bubble. He understands that the path that he must take is his own, and it is to be performed alone, whilst being the center of his own little universe. Now we can be reminded of the last scene of Conquistador, written by Izzy herself, the conflict with the Mayan priest, but now the story can actually be finished by Tommy himself. Instead of slaying the Conquistador, the priest kneels in awe. It is not the body that stands before him, but the spirit itself ventured from the higher realm. The light of the now enlightened monk reveals to the priest the first father, the one who sacrificed himself, and as such, Conquistador is permitted to fulfill his goal. The tree of life stands before him. Disregarding the pain expressed by the whole world, he uses his ritual dagger with a symbol of Trinity to wound the tree itself, so that he can drink its sap. Laughing hysterically, in absolute primal awe, he gulps down the miraculous substance. The light of Xibalba hits him. The ineffable God now shines clearly through all layers. For a brief moment, it is the Conquistador traveling to the heart of divinity. He understands his promise as fulfilled and is now prepared to wear the ring. But just before being able to put it on, he falls in pain and loses the ring in lush greenery. Flowers begin to sprout from his body until devouring him fully. His goal and his tree were illusionary. They were not meant to fulfill a vision of a mortal body. Body is supposed to die. But his sacrifice is what permits the spirit to move on. The monk reaches through the veils of reality and picks up this golden ring. The glory was meant to be on a spiritual level. An item, the ring, travels between the three layers and finishes its circle. It closes the gap between abstractions and moves the structure of the whole story. From asymmetrical embeddings, a triangle is formed, one which is engraved on the sacred Mayan dagger. It is the triangle of the body, the mind, and the spirit. Essentially, the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. The Rubik's Cube is solved, and in its middle lies Xibalba, divinity, the ineffable light of our whole existential experience, glow of a lantern wrapped in a puzzle. The monk puts on the ring. Divinity awaits him, and in the heart of Xibalba, all lights are extinguished. Nothingness, not unlike when the lights went out in the Tommy's lab. A single white point remains. The singularity, the Kabbalistic Sephira named Keter, the crown, the origin of everything. And from it, in a beautiful explosion, the whole universe can be born. All other secondary trees can be revived and bloom again through the light of the seed, and the story can finally be finished. Its end was the revelation of the ultimate divinity, hidden behind the gruesome mask of death, the ultimate road to awe.